That's right, it's another video where I reimagine characters created for Thomas and Friends in the style of the original books. I'm quite enjoying working on these, and the last two have proven popular, so it only makes sense to make more. It's time I got my tablet at the ready. Molly is an interesting case. She was the first engine to be created as part of the Hit Entertainment seasons, and was also the first TV series character to be based on a class of engine that is no longer around, the Great Eastern Railway D56 or Claude Hamilton class. As with the majority of characters created during this time, Molly doesn't appear very frequently, and indeed her debut episode is pretty much the only time she seems to have any significance. This influenced my decision to make her an engine that doesn't live on Sodor, and indeed never visited Sodor. Given that Molly is a Great Eastern design, I figured that she may have been acquainted with Toby back when he lived in the East Anglia. I've decided to make it so that Toby knew Molly during his days as a harbour tramway shunter. This is because I wanted to paint Molly in LNER green as opposed to black, and my understanding is that Toby didn't start working his tramway with Henrietta until during or after World War II, and during that time Molly would have been most likely painted black, either LNER or BR black. During the 1930s and earlier, Toby worked at a harbour tramway somewhere in the East Anglia, which could be Yarmouth Docks. The nearby Yarmouth Vauxhall Station, now just called Great Yarmouth Station, was home to 3 D56s during 1938. These were 8815, 8873 and 8884, so Molly could have been one of these. Incidentally, one of Toby's brothers was also stationed here during this period, number 7138. For what it's worth, Toby's number during this point is thought to have been 7127. So, I've decided to draw Molly with Toby at a station vaguely resembling Yarmouth Vauxhall as it looked during the steam era. Given the time period, I've gone for a style vaguely reminiscent of C. Reginald Dalby. Aside from Duck, and I suppose Toby in his pre-Sodor days, I don't think he ever painted an engine in a real-life livery, so it's interesting seeing both Toby and Molly in LNER colours. In the TV series, Molly is a shy and sensitive engine who prefers to avoid conflict. She is also mainly tasked with pulling trucks, despite her class being express passenger engines. It could be that she doesn't like the pressure of hauling passengers or having to interact with people, and so she sought permission to pull goods trains instead. She felt happier and more comfortable with trucks, but there was a catch. The other engines in her class made fun of her. As far as they were concerned, passenger trains were far more important. This vitriol was only compounded when Molly was tasked primarily with supplying a coaling plant with empty trucks. Toby suggested an idea to Molly to get her crew to cover the empty trucks with tarpaulins to hide the fact that they were empty. Unfortunately, this plan backfired during a particularly windy evening. The jig was up, and Molly was back to square one. The other engines went back to teasing her, and Molly, not wanting to get involved in drama, returned to her shed. Problems arose, however, when the coaling plant ran out of trucks, meaning that if an engine needed to refuel, they would have had to travel all the way there, and some of them didn't have enough coal to do that. At first, the shedmaster was angry at Molly, but Toby pressured the other engines into explaining why Molly hadn't delivered the trucks. They apologised, and Molly got her job done. All the engines at Yarmouth Vauxhall became more understanding of one another. Molly was no longer teased, and she became a much happier and more self-confident engine. With all that said, here is the finished drawing. Neville is another character who only appears briefly in the TV series. His only significant appearance is in Thomas and the New Engine. In this story, a rumour spreads about him being friends with Ari and Bert because Thomas sees the three interacting and mistakes Neville for a diesel. Neville's alleged looking like a diesel is a quote-unquote fact that his merchandise and character profiles are always sure to make a mention of. This is despite the fact that he doesn't really look like a diesel engine. For starters, he has a tender, and whilst brake tenders are a thing that diesel engines use, the thing that Neville is lugging around is clearly not a brake tender. In the story, the rumour about Neville spreads and morphs, making the other engines wary of Neville. They neglect to warn him about a broken bridge, and when Thomas learns the truth about Neville, he rushes off to rescue him. Neville is a Southern Railway Q1 class. Being an austerity design built during World War II, it's possible that he was brought to Sodor to help out during the conflict. During the war, the various railway companies put their differences aside to fight off a larger foe, so the Southern Railway could have sent a Q1 class to Sodor to help deliver supplies to and from the island. The engines are wary of Neville not because they think he's a diesel, but because they fear he may be a German spy. The Sodor engine's knowledge of German locomotives mainly comes from what the engines on the other railway have told them, and this information in itself has gone through a game of telephone from engine to engine. The main thing they know about German engines is that they look noticeably different to British engines, and that they wear an unlined black livery. Neville certainly fits this rather broad criteria, so the Sodor engines are on their guard. During Neville's visit, the Harwin-Dury bridge near Croven's Gate breaks. Either a storm has occurred in the night, or the bridge has been bombed. The news travels westward across the island, eventually reaching Thomas. Thomas is supposed to relay this information to Neville at the junction, but he's so angry with him that he instead tells Neville that the signals are broken and he should ignore any set at danger. Serves him right, he huffs as Neville trundles through with a heavy goods train. Suddenly he hears a voice. Serves who right? The Fat Controller has just arrived at the station. Thomas explains that he is certain that Neville is a spy from Germany. He knows what to be on the lookout for because he's heard it from other engines. The Fat Controller speaks severely to Thomas, explaining that the engines are wrong and that he shouldn't listen to rumours. Neville was sent to Sodor from the Southern Railway to help out during the war, and the Fat Controller even confirms that he was built at Brighton Works, the same works that Thomas was built at. Thomas is aghast, and as quick as a flash heads out onto the main line to try and stop Neville before it's too late. Topham thinks Thomas is running away and hitches a ride in his cab. Thomas manages to find Neville before an accident occurs, but the train is so long that Neville can't hear him. Thomas gets Neville's guard to couple him up and pulls Neville away from the bridge with all his might. Whilst the Fat Controller is pleased with Thomas's heroism, he still hasn't forgotten that the whole kerfuffle was Thomas's fault in the first place. As a punishment, Thomas is sent to the main line to haul goods trains for a few weeks, whilst Neville looks after Annie and Clarabelle on Thomas's branch line. I wanted to draw this image in a style similar to that of Clive Spong for two reasons. Firstly is that I've never properly attempted this style before. Secondly, it's often said that Neville's face is reminiscent of the way that Spong draws faces. This scene is from the early 1940s and so predates the rebuilding and relocating of Thomas's Junction in 1955. So rather than the curved design of the later books, I've decided to depict the station closer to how it looks in the Dolby illustrations. With that said and done, here is the completed picture. Dennis is based on Oliver Bully's one-off diesel shunter design, 11001. This engine was built in 1949 and mainly performed shunting and light goods work before being withdrawn and scrapped in 1959. I could make Dennis a non-Sodor resident like the last two engines, but I have a different idea. In this universe, 11001 was instead sent over to the northwestern region to see if a change of scenery would clear his bonnet. The other railway were convinced that Dennis was lazy. Dennis was brought to Tidmouth to help Duck with station pilot duties. Duck was wary at first since his previous experience with the diesel was far from peachy, but soon found out that Dennis had no ill will towards the steam engines. Having said that, Dennis would frequently find excuses to get out of work. He'd often act clueless when being tasked with duties, and would make out that he didn't get it even after having it explained to him multiple times, leading Duck to give up and just do the jobs himself. After a few weeks, the Fat Controller came to see how Duck and Dennis were getting on, only to find that Duck seemed more overworked than before. The Fat Controller demanded that Dennis pulled his weight, only to discover that Dennis's alleged laziness was really just a front. Dennis proved to be a rather sickly engine, who often struggled with even the most menial of shunting and goods duties. Dennis was clearly embarrassed, and explained that he didn't want to get teased by the others. The Fat Controller was annoyed, but understanding, and had Dennis sent to Crovan's Gate Works to see what they could do. In the meantime, Hat had to have a talk with an inspector. He had recently ordered a new engine from Scotland, and had just heard that two had arrived. Eventually, Dennis returned to service a completely changed engine. After Duck got his own branch line, Dennis became the primary shunter at Tidmouth and could easily handle Duck's old workload and then some. Dennis retained his BR number, but now sported a two-tone grey colour scheme. The Fat Controller was so pleased with Dennis's work that he had another one built. Norman retained the same numbering scheme as Dennis, becoming BR 11002. It's interesting that both engines shared names with fictional badly behaved children. The XLMS Class 11 diesel shunters were all withdrawn before acquiring TOPS numbers, save for one which was reclassified as 01/5. So Dennis and Norman became the new Class 11 in the 1970s, retaining their old numbers. Norman became a shunter at Bower-in-Furness, wearing an Indian red colour scheme vaguely reminiscent of that worn by the engines of the Furness Railway. With that said, here is the completed image. And there we are, 3 more engines from the TV series with a Railway Series twist. I feel as though by this point in the show's production, there was less thought being put into how the new characters could realistically fit into the show, or maybe time constraints and executive decisions meant that said thought was less apparent than before. But I think I managed to make the 3 engines work. Let me know your thoughts by commenting down below, and don't forget to subscribe.